Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. Now, African countries opened their markets on the 1st of January 2021 under the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Now, the agreement is expected to accelerate growth and substantial development by doubling the overall intra-Africa trade by 2022 and tripling trade in agricultural goods by 2023. Now, the new market agreement is estimated to be as large as 1.3 billion people across the continent, with a combined gross domestic product of $3.4 trillion. Now, this has a potential of lifting up to 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty, and that's according to the World Bank. Now, the trade agreement is, however, still far from meeting its intended targets. Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by Professor Pumela Msweli, who's the Executive Dean and CEO of the UNISA Graduate School of Business Leadership. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We're about to approach the month of August. This agreement came into being in earnest at the beginning of the year. Why do you think that we've not really started to get the gains that we've expected?
I think first there was a bit of delay. The pandemic sort of disrupted the plan, and it took long to come to the agreement in terms of the even the tariffs. Countries did not all sign up. They did not deposit their instruments in good time. And to conclude the rules of origin also took time. I think most importantly, countries were not really ready to submit their tariff offers. So all of that, I think, contributed to it taking a little bit longer.
What does that tell us, though? I mean, sometimes the politicians say the right things, but they don't follow it up with genuine commitment. And I'm thinking about things like Mozambique, where we promised to contribute X amount to agriculture, and it never ever really happened. And I hope, and I'm just wondering if this is going to be different.
Well, this is a bit of a problem because this particular agreement is going to take more than political will. It will take even a complete shift in terms of the skill sets, because if you want to increase intra-Africa trade, you've got to have the right skills. You've got to have your entrepreneurs access the markets and have sufficient information to be able to export or import. And that even requires that we up our game in terms of literacy, because regional integration is somewhat sophisticated, and it requires a level of sophistication. So politics alone is not going to help us. Yeah.
But we've got the skills, though, because Europe, North America, they're benefiting from our exports. So trading across borders is not new. It's just that we don't do it on our own continent.
Well, the interesting thing is that informal trade is, in terms of volume, is much higher than formal trade amongst the most, or rather the majority of entrepreneurs, because it's a space that large business occupies, because you've got to have deep pockets to be able to trade, because it takes infrastructure, it takes capital, it takes big companies to be able to navigate those very complex spaces. It takes a whole lot of research and development. Although I must say, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement has come up with instruments such as the observatory that allows entrepreneurs to access what is the export market you want to go to, what are the products you could trade with, and it even gives you volumes, what is happening across the 54 countries that are involved in intra-Africa trade.
Do you think that one of our challenges has been the way the colonial setup split us up into various language areas? Because one almost gets a sense that there are divides between whether it's francophone or lusophone or anglophone, and that we don't often think about going into these countries if we're from a different language set, and yet there's all these potentials. And I just wonder if that's also another mindset shift that's required.
You know, yesterday I was doing a lecture and I was looking at this whole issue of boundaries. You know, there are boundaries that really don't exist. And we have entrenched them, of course, with regulations and our sovereignty in thinking. And yet, if you go to Mapungubwe, for example, you see that really it's a little river that divides Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So, and that mindset, it's really going to require that we unravel it in our own consciousness and realize that we are just inseparable.
Yeah.
Because if we can achieve that, I think we would even overcome xenophobia. And right now, the biggest problem is that intra-Africa trade is less than 20%. In Europe, intra-European trading is around about 70%. And countries such as South Africa trade more with Europe and countries outside South Africa. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think it has to do with our industrial policies. It has to do with the type of economies we have. We are not sufficiently diversified. It also has to do a lot with the differences in our infrastructure setups, as well as the different economic setups in different countries. We are so heterogeneous that it's going to be, it's going to take a whole lot of preparation and change and transformation to make it work.
So what are the big things that we need to do to really get this thing off the ground, this inter-Africa trade story and this continental free trade agreement to work for us? What are the big things that we need to do?
I think we need to start having conversations. That's why we have launched this conference, because we realize that small enterprises are not even aware that there is now one market. There is just one African market that they can access. They are not limited to their own countries. So I think the big thing we need to do is to have conversations. I even think that international trade should be taught at really foundational level, so that we open up our thinking and not just think that you are your own little country and you can operate in your own little country. So that mindset and set has to be realized through education, I think. And the second thing is just respecting investment. Respecting our own investment on our infrastructure. And while we still build, what is it called? While we're still burning buildings when we are angry, it's going to be very difficult to attract investment, because the whole plight of intra-Africa trade is to increase investment, is to expand the economy, is to facilitate movement of goods and movement flow of direct investment, bi-directional flow, multi-directional flow. And if we don't respect the things that we've built, so it's going to take mind shifts, I think upskilling people and making them understand the importance of multilateralism and the importance of I would say unity consciousness, to realize that we are actually just one market.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of this multilateralism and working together, because each country has a strength, and it would be amazing if we could, I don't know, get some copper technology in Zambia, get some engineering skill in Zimbabwe, get some manufacturing input from South Africa, 3 entities perhaps working together and producing something amazing to sell even to the rest of the world.
Yep. Yeah. It really would, to actually harness our differences and identify our different endowments and see how we create our own value chains, because that's what it's going to take. I mean, with this Ukraine war now, even the pandemic, it has exposed our vulnerabilities and how the global value chain have just immobilized us. Yeah. But there's an opportunity there, as you say, for us now to get into that space and create our own global, our own value chains within Africa. Yeah.
The politicians will function at a certain level, public sector. Can the private sector get on with the job regardless?
I think the private sector is the sector that's going to drive Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, because it's attractive in that the tariffs are going to be reduced or eliminated, which means it's going to be less expensive to move products across different countries, and it's going to create, it's going to increase demand, and when the demand is increased, there's more money to be made, and the center of intra-Africa trade is the private sector, is a businessman. So yes, the private sector will drive it. Public sector needs to provide the macroeconomic environment. Education sector needs to provide the skills. Yeah.
Professor, I wish we could talk more. Perhaps we need to have more conversations more regularly. But for tonight, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, that was Professor Msweli, who's Executive Dean and CEO of the UNISA Graduate School of Business.